Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about forms, okay? And forms are probably something you're going to do in every single application you build. Now, these forms will likely be the most complex thing we go over in this series. In fact, I know it will be because this is probably about the last video in this chapter. So we're going to learn how they work. If you get behind or don't understand, don't worry. We're going to come back to them many times throughout this course in the future chapters. But I want to get you guys going on forms and how they basically work. So let's jump over to the screen. All right, so here we are in our home page, and excuse me. What I'm going to do actually is go to the Explorer here and let's create a whole new file. And I don't want to do it there. I want to do it here. And, we'll do forms.html. All right, so we have forms.html. It's a whole new HTML page. And in our index, let's just create a link to it just to get there easily. So let's go down here to our links, and I'm going to add a new link right here. And I'm going to do href attribute, and this is going to be in /forms.html, and I'm just going to call that forms as well. Oops. I'm going to save it, go back here, refresh. Now we have a new link called forms. So go ahead and click that, and we have an empty screen here, which is what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and close the index.html and the aboutme.html because all we need open right now is this forms.html. So let's go ahead and create our structured page here, and we're going to do our doctype HTML tag at the top, and then we'll do HTML, and we'll do our head, and we'll just give it a title for now, and we're going to call it forms. And now we'll go ahead and get started on the body, and we'll give this an H1, and we're going to say forms. Okay, so now we're back. If I refresh the page, we're back here to a blank page with just a heading for forms. Okay, so how do we create a form? Well, HTML is pretty easy, and you can probably tell by now that we probably, if I had to guess, we would probably need a form tag. And if you guess that, you would be correct. Now, form tag takes a couple different attributes here. We're not going to worry too much about these right now on what they are. So let's just go ahead and empty this out. We'll just leave an empty form here. We're going to talk more about those attributes and things when we get going. If I refresh, you don't actually see a form, although there is a form down here in the inspector that you can see. But we don't have anything in the form yet. So a form is comprised of a lot of inputs, and there are different types of inputs. We'll cover a few different types of inputs today. We're not going to cover them all, but we'll cover a few different ones. The first type of input that we want to do, it starts out with just an input. Now, an input is one of those elements that gets opened, but it doesn't have a closing tag. So you can do it like this. And again, it confuses my editor because there is no such thing as a closing input tag. Okay, so you're not going to do that. And input, all of its necessary information is going to be done with attributes. Now, an attribute that you're probably going to need right off the bat that we haven't talked about yet is ID. ID is an attribute that is unique. Okay, so it is an identifier of this specific input. And what we're going to do is we're going to give this an ID of, we'll just call this, well, let's do email, okay? And if I just refresh right now, we will see that we actually get an input on the screen. It's not very pretty, but it is an input. And this input, if we right click and inspect on it, you can see in the inspector it does have an ID equal to email. So what I could do here is assume that this is going to be used for people to put their email address in. Maybe this would be some sort of login registration form. So maybe what I'll do is right here above the input, let's do another element called label. And this will allow us to put a label. So we're going to do email/username right here. And if I refresh, you can see that it's inline by default. And I'm fine with that for now. We'll just go ahead and keep that. One thing we could do to make this break, and I haven't shown you this yet, but there is actually a break tag, and it's just BR, and it doesn't take anything. There's no closing tag, so it's just BR, and it closes it. It's a self-closing tag. And now if I press refresh, this BR, even though this is an inline element, the BR tag forces a page break or a break, and then our input is right below that. So that's one way we could do that without doing styling. Typically, I would do this with CSS, which we'll learn in the next chapter. The other thing that the label will need, there's an attribute called for. And what we want to be able to do for many different reasons is we want to let the browser know that this label is specifically for this input. Okay, so this ID right here that we've given email, we want that for to match that. So this for is going to match the ID of the input. So if I would change this to say email 1, I would need to have this be email 1 as well. Okay, so that right there for accessibility, and if I actually click, well, let me save that. Oops, had the wrong thing here. Let me save that and refresh. If I click that, and I actually clicked the label, it actually will focus my input and put my cursor in there. You can see my cursor blinking, and now it is actually ready to type into. Okay, so I can type into this input now. So I could do Curtis or Parham Curtis at mailinator.com, and that could be my email address or my username. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do here, oops, dang it. I have a bad habit of hitting Control Save all the time, even if I'm in the browser. So if you see me do that, you can laugh at me. And I guarantee you at some point in your life, you're going to get so used to hitting Control S for save that you're just going to do it all over the place. So you can laugh at yourself later as well. All right, so that is just a regular input. Now let me show you one more attribute that could go in this input, and this could be type. And right now we have a type of text, okay? So this isn't going to change anything here. The default, if you don't give it this type attribute, the default type will be text. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to give this one more. I'm going to give this name equals, and we'll make this different than the ID. I'm just going to call this username. Okay, and I'll show you more about what that does a little bit later. So we have our email and username now. Let's go ahead and skip down a few lines here, and let's give this another input. And this time, let's give it an ID of password. Okay. That's all we'll do for now. So let's refresh and see what happens. And oof, what happened? Well, the password goes right next to here because, again, these inputs by default are inline elements. And we may not want that. We may want to break. So just for now, until we get used to CSS, let's go ahead and add us a break tag here. And if I refresh now after saving, it goes down to the next line. Okay, that's cool. That's what I want. I'm going to put an additional break tag. And guys, this isn't what you would normally do. You wouldn't use a bunch of break tags to add space. We would do that in CSS. However, we haven't learned CSS yet, and I just want to make this form look somewhat decent. So again, with this password, let's go ahead now and let's give this a label. And I'm going to give it a label of password. And again, we want to give it the for attribute inside the label tag. And we're going to make this for password. If I refresh now, we have that. And again, we're going to do the same thing where we put a break tag after that label. And now we have email / username or password. Now password, we wouldn't really want to do this where we could type in here and have this plain text, okay? So HTML is cool enough to give us, you remember by default, if we don't give it a type attribute, it's going to give us a text type input. But HTML5 comes with a type equal to password. And now if I save this and refresh and I type something in here, you just see that the letters are not plain visible. So if I'm typing a password into a field and someone's looking over my shoulder in a coffee shop or something, they can't see my password because it obfuscates it or kind of puts these little asterisks or dots for every character that I type in here. So I could just keep typing characters and that would be obfuscated. So that's what the type of password does. I know it's a little confusing right now because we have an ID called password and we have a type called password. This type actually needs to be lowercase password like this for it to work. But I could, we don't have to have the ID password here. We could just do pass. And just to make this clear, we would do the same thing in the for. And we can refresh, and now this was plain text, and this one here is obfuscated, is a type of password. And if I inspect that, indeed we can see in the input here that it is a type of password. Okay, so we have up here, we have a type of text for our email field, and we have a type of password for our password field. So let me show you one other type of input that we can have here, and that type would be, we'll go down here and we'll just add another input. This time though, what we're going to do is, this is a special type of input, and this type is going to be of submit, and we're going to give this a value, and we're going to say log in, and we'll save that and then refresh the page. And again, we got these inline elements here. So let's go ahead and do a break tag like that and refresh. And now we have our login here. Now this is an input, but it looks like a button. And that's because we gave it the type of submit and we gave it the value of login, which is what goes inside of the button text there. The value is the inside the button text. Now, an input can also have, let me just go ahead and break this down, these BR tags down to a new line here. The input itself can also have a value. And if I put a value in here, this is going to be my email, okay, or something like that. If I save that and refresh, the value is already pre-populated into here, and I could actually change it by then backspacing and typing inside of there. Okay, another useful thing that you might want to do is, instead of putting a value that's predefined in there, you could actually do something called a placeholder. Now, a placeholder attribute, you could do something like your email and save that. And when I refresh that, you can see that it's more muted, and it says your email here is kind of like helper text, and it's not actually, that text is not actually part of the value. You see, I can't push right or left and scroll through your email, but the moment I type something, the placeholder disappears, and now it is just what I type. And if I go back and empty it out, the placeholder shows back up. So that is what the placeholder attribute can do inside of an input text. Okay, so we have a couple different types of inputs here. Another one that you might see on a login form is you could have like a little checkbox. So let's go ahead now and do a checkbox here, and we'll just do that right above the submit here. And so this one would also be an input, and it would be type of checkbox. Okay, and then what we would do here then is we could give it a value of remember. And then this one's a little bit different because if I just, let me just close that and show you what happens. And I'm going to give it a break tag here below there just so we can see it separated from the submit button. But we have this checkbox, but it doesn't have any text. So let me show you how we can handle that. One of the best ways to do is we would still want to give this an ID, and we want to give this an ID of, let's say, remember_me. All right, so that's not going to do anything on its own, but what I could do, I want to have the text after this. So what we could do here is we could actually wrap the label. Well, actually, we could put the label below this. I'll show you two different ways. And we could do remember me. And then if I save that and refresh, you can see remember me is a label that's after the checkbox here. And I can check and uncheck this checkbox. However, I can't check the text here because I forgot to put the for attribute right here. And that has to match the ID of the input. Okay, so now if I save that and refresh, if I click the text or in the checkbox, it's still not going to do it. Okay, so that's because I typed remember ID here. I must have been saying the one word and typing that word. So now if I click this, it will check and uncheck that box. So now we have a few different types of inputs here. We have a text type input, we have a password type input, and we have a checkbox type input. There's also a type of radio, which will just be a round dot. I don't think I'm going to go through and show you that right now, but you can look that up on your own, and we will get into some of that probably in our projects that we build throughout this course. Whoops, there I go with the control save on the wrong window again. I did want to show you one more really common select, and it really doesn't make sense with the login form, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway just for an example. So let me give a few more break tags here. And again, these break tags are ugly. This is not how you would do it, but that's how we're going to do it for right now until we learn more about CSS. And then right here, what I'm going to do is give it a label and let's close that label, and let's do favorite color. Oops, and I spelled label wrong. So I gotta clean that up. All right, and then what we can do is there's another element called select. Okay, and a select does have, unlike the regular inputs, a select does have a closing tag because it needs more information here, and I'm going to show you what that is in a second. But let's go ahead and give this an ID, and we'll do favorite underscore color. And then we'll do the same thing for label here, where we say for favorite underscore color. Okay, let's just refresh the page and see what we have here. Let's do another BR tag. If I refresh here, I got favorite color and a little drop down that doesn't have anything in it. So, and that's because our select right here is empty. So a select takes some elements inside of it. You can kind of think of this as like the ordered list where it has an OL tag with some LIs underneath it. But a select has something called an option. Now options do have opening and closing tags. And so I'm going to go ahead and put some options in here. Let's do red. And you can see that the value here actually, let's put something in there because I'll show you what that does here in a moment. I'll go back and give the first option a value as well. Now the reason that the editor didn't auto fill in that value is because oftentimes what you'll do is you'll have an empty option up top without. You won't always do this, but you might put choose color or something like that here. And you won't have a value there because that's actually a non-selected value. So let's just go ahead and save that and refresh. And now you can see favorite color. And under this, you can choose red or purple. Now I could add many more colors here. I'll just add one more. It seems like a lot of people's favorite color is blue. You can put your own colors, but it doesn't matter. Now we have 3 options inside of that select that we can select as part of our form. And so you see now we have a different type of input, but this is still an input. We just use a different tag called select because it is treated a little bit different than an input. You can tell it has even different styling than the input. And we'll deal with some of that when we get into our CSS, and we'll talk about why that is and how to go about and make these look the same and make them look nicer. I think that's all the tags I'm going to show you in a form for now. So this is our form, but I do want to show you some things about how this works. So if I hit save here, let's go down here in our inspector, and let me just turn off my ugly face here just so I don't accidentally cover something up. And what I want to do here is I'm going to click on this network tab. And inside this network tab, we have a few different things going on here. Let me just clean up. I'm going to click here and get rid of the show overview because I just literally want to show you what happens here. So now what I want to do is I'm going to fill out my email. So it's parhamcurtis@mailinator.com. And we'll put our password in here. And sure, we'll leave that checked. And I'm going to choose my favorite color as purple. And then I'm going to click login. Now you'll see what happens is when I click login, it refreshes the page. And it actually adds the values up here in the header or in the URL bar. That's not necessarily what we want. So let's clean up that a little bit. So this right here happened, and I'll show you. You notice it only has username and it doesn't have the password or any of the others up there. And that's because we don't have a name attribute on these. So it doesn't know how to send these as key value pairs or name and then the value of the form field. So instead what I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and give the password a name of pass as well. And the remember me cookie, we'll give our cookie, it's not a cookie, but we would set this as remember me. And then again on the select, we'll give this a name as well. And we're going to call this favorite color. I'm going to go up here and refresh this, and let's get rid of all of this except for the forms.html. I'm going to refresh, and now I'm going to go through and fill this out again. And now you can see in the URL we have username equals parham, and then a weird %40, which we're not going to cover that right now, but we'll talk about that later. And we have this mailinator. And then if I just keep looking over here, you can see that the rest of my fields will be in there. Pass, I passed, the value of that was password. Remember me was set to remember me. And favorite color was set to purple. Okay, now we typically wouldn't want to do this in the URL, but that's the default behavior of the form when you submit it. Let me show you really quickly how we can change that behavior. And that is done through an attribute here in the form where we are going to change it. Right now by default, the method would be set to get. Now get is the default request that your browser makes when you submit a form or even navigate somewhere. That is a get request. So this method of get would not change the behavior there. Instead, what we want to do is we want to do something called a post request. So we want to set our method to post. And don't worry if you're confused right now, but I'm going to show you what that does. we're going to talk way more about those methods later. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out, well, first, let me refresh the page. Okay, and then I'm going to empty out my, my network tab down here by clicking this clear. And then I'm going to fill this out one more time. Click remember me, purple, and I'm going to click login. Now you'll notice straight away that, and I said straight away again, that's funny. You'll notice right away that this URL bar did not change, even though it did refresh the page and it emptied our values out. If you look down here at our network tab, it did make a network request. And so I'm going to drag this up a little bit so we can look at this a little closer. And I'm going to click on that. And we'll go to our headers here. And we'll notice in our headers that this request was sent back to the same page that we were already on. Okay. And if you look down here in form data, because we did this as a post method, if we look down here in form data, you can see my key value pairs. So the whatever name I gave these inputs as attributes, they show up as the key here, username, password, remember me, and favorite color. And you can see off to the right of that, it sends the values. So that is how the form sends the values. In this case, would normally go back to a server, or the server would do something with these values when it was submitted. Now, we're not going to get into any of that right now. I just wanted to show you how forms work in the HTML and what their behaviors are in those. So right now, I'll show you one last thing before we get off the video, and that would be that when it submitted the form, it submitted it back by default to the same exact file that it was on. And sometimes you want to submit it somewhere else. And that is what there's one more attribute, or another attribute called action. And if you use action with an empty string, or don't put it in at all, it's going to go to the same form that it's on. But let's go ahead now, and I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to cancel that. And I'm going to fill this out again. In fact, let me open up my inspector again. I'm going to fill this out. And let's see what happens now that we changed our action. I'm going to hit submit. And nothing happened. So let's see why. Let me look at my elements here. My body. Okay, so it doesn't have the action listed here, so I must not have saved, and I didn't. You can see here I did not save this file before I refresh the page. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again, and we'll check on this. So let's fill this out one last time. So if I wanted to go to a different page, like a thank you page or something else, when they click submit and not back to the same page, I would set this action to be to a different page on my site. So I'll go ahead and click login. And now you can see that it shows this information from our About Us page because it took us to the About Me. And more importantly, instead of doing a normal GET request like that would happen if you clicked on a link, it did a POST request and it sent that information along with the request. And then I would normally on that page, so say like in the About Me page, I would handle any sort of server information here at the top of the page with those posted values, okay? And so that would normally handle the login information, the login on the server. But we're not to that point yet. I just wanted to show you how the HTML part of forms work, so that when we get to that later on, and you can see here, we're going to do this one more time. We're going to go back to this forms. But now when we go to the forms, you can see that there's no form information because we had clicked on a link to get here. And that is just a standard GET request, and that is not a POST request. Okay, so it's different. It's important that you understand the difference between those types of requests. You don't have to understand necessarily the differences yet, but you need to just know that they are different, okay? So I know this video kind of bumped it up a notch on complexity, and let me get back to my camera here. This video did bump up the complexity quite a bit, and we covered a lot more in one video here than we've covered in previous videos. So you may have to watch this video again. I don't expect you to fully understand forms just yet because we haven't really implemented them or used the data for them in any way. And once we do that, I think it's going to click with you if it hasn't yet. So if it hasn't clicked yet, just practice making the fields, okay? It's pretty fun to just make a form, put some stuff in there and then go over and actually refresh, save it, then refresh it, and then fill it out. And it's kind of fun now that your website starts to seem like it's doing something other than just displaying text on the screen, right? So this is kind of how you start interacting with people. You allow them to click on certain things like links or buttons and fill out inputs. And so it gets really, really cool. And I just realized I did not have my screen on when I was clicking on that, but you can imagine what I was pointing on. I'm just on the form. But guys, listen, you don't have to remember everything. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next video. I just want you to know the basics and how it works. So let me just go back here. So looking at this form, the form itself has a couple of attributes. And then we have a couple of different types of inputs here. And we have some labels that we can put on for those inputs. Okay. And then we also learned about the select, and the select takes some options inside of there. Okay. And one more thing to just point out really quickly is this value right here in this attribute, that is what's sent back during the post if someone selects one of these options. Okay. It's not the text that's inside of there that's displayed to the user. It's whatever you put in this value that would be sent back. Okay, so when it sent it back, it was the lowercase purple and not the uppercase purple. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I hope you're having fun. Just go and practice with forms a little bit. Rewatch the video if you have to. Just kind of make one of these login type forms or make a different type of form and just play around. Use the text type inputs. Use password type inputs. Use a checkbox. And use a select or a couple selects to make a form. And then in the end, create the input of type submit, and go ahead and right click in your browser and click inspect and go to network, and just kind of see what happens when you go ahead and click that, so that you can see what was in the form data. So whatever you filled out in the form should be in that form data. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I'm having fun teaching you this. I know it's not the easiest things to learn. It's definitely not the easiest thing to teach. We have to keep breaking this stuff down into small chunks and take it as it comes. And I got so much more to teach you guys. I can't wait for the next videos. And we're gonna start a new chapter soon over CSS, and we'll learn how to make this stuff look a lot nicer. All right. See you guys in the next video.